We've already unpacked James's words, and let endurance have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Our earlier breakdown made clear that perfect and complete doesn't mean sinless perfection. It's about a life that is mature, whole, and undivided in its loyalty to God. And James's pastoral push is that we not cut short the process God uses to bring us there. Endurance is not a holding pattern. It is the pathway. But now I want to zoom out, because James isn't simply giving us a moral encouragement for personal growth. He's tapping into a grand story of the Bible, a story that stretches from the first page to the last. And when we place James 1:4 within that bigger frame, endurance becomes far more than a virtue. It becomes a way of participating in God's global, cosmic restoration of his presence across the whole of creation. Think back to Genesis 1:2. We don't just find a garden, we find what Desmond Alexander calls a temple garden, the first sacred place where God dwells with his image bearers. Humanity was created to serve as priests and kings, tending creation, ruling under God's authority, extending the boundaries of the garden until the whole earth became a sanctuary for God. That is wholeness. Harmony with God, with others, harmony with creation, harmony with ourselves. Nothing was broken, nothing was missing. But then came Genesis 3. Sin fractured everything. Intimacy with God gave way to hiding. Unity with others turned into blame. Joyful work became toil. Peace within became replaced by shame. Humanity was exiled from the temple garden, cut off from God's direct presence as being the center of their lives. Alexander frames the rest of the Bible as a story of two cities, Babylon, built on self-rule and fragmentation, and the New Jerusalem, defined by God's rule, holiness, and wholeness. God's answer is to call a covenant people, Israel, to be a kingdom of priests, Exodus 19:6. The tabernacle and the temple are like mini Eden spaces where God's presence dwells on earth again. Israel is called to tamim, blameless, whole, and shalem, undivided in loyalty. But their history mirrors ours: fractured devotion, divided love, compromised witness. And then Jesus comes, the true temple, the perfect priest king, the fully whole human. He lives completely integrated. Every word, thought, and action flows from love for the Father. Through his death and resurrection, he removes the barrier and restores direct access to God's presence. Alexander notes that what we lost in Eden is now extended to the ends of the earth, not by one physical garden, but by a people, the church, who carry God's presence wherever they go. This is where N.T. Wright's perspective deepens the picture. Wright says the Bible is like a 5-act drama. Act 1, creation, God's good world. Act 2, fall, humanity is fractured and in exile. Act 3, Israel, God's covenant people called to embody his purpose. Now the climax, Act 4, Jesus, the climax of where God's plan is fulfilled and redefined. Act 5, the church, living between resurrection and new creation, awaiting the final act. And here's the key. We are in Act 5. We are not spectators. We are actors, called to improvise faithfully in line with the earlier acts and the climax in Jesus. That means James 1:4 is not just about internal character. It's a stage direction for how we live until the curtain rises on the New Jerusalem. Wright also speaks of our lives as signposts of the kingdom. Endurance through trial is one of those signposts. When you persevere with your loyalty intact, You're pointing beyond this moment to the reality that God's kingdom has already begun in Jesus and will one day be complete. Perfect and complete, lacking in nothing, isn't merely personal maturity. It's your life becoming a preview of the whole creation's future wholeness. Now bring this back to James. When he says perfect and complete, lacking in nothing, he's describing the kind of person who can inhabit the New Jerusalem, undivided in loyalty, whole in love, aligned with God's reign. Endurance in trial is how God forms that kind of person. Every time you choose trust over fear, obedience over compromise, you're stepping into your original Eden vocation as a priest king, living under God's reign and previewing the wholeness of new creation. Alexander gives us this cosmic context. God restoring his presence to fill the whole earth. Wright gives us the kingdom mission lens. Our endurance is active participation in God's rule, breaking in here and now. Together, they keep James 1:4 from shrinking into a private spiritual growth slogan. This is about your life being caught up into God's mission to renew all things. And this happens in the tension. Wright calls this the already and not yet. The new creation has begun with Jesus' resurrection, but it's not yet complete. That means lacking nothing is both a present work of the Spirit and a future promise. Your endurance now is a real transformation, but also a rehearsal for the day when God's work is finished and the world is whole. This also means wholeness is not just individual, it's corporate. Wright would remind us that James is writing to a community under pressure. God is shaping not just mature individuals, but a mature people whose life together reflects the kingdom. That's why later in James, we'll see calls for unity, justice, mercy, integrity of speech, all part of a community becoming whole. Revelations 21 and 22 shows us the end of the story. The New Jerusalem comes down, a garden city temple where God dwells with his people. The curse is gone. The tree of life stands at the center, healing the nations. And there, God's people are exactly what James envisions. Perfect, complete, lacking nothing. No fracture, no divided loyalty, whole in every direction. That's where James 1:4 points us. That's why he says, let endurance have its full effect. It's not just about making you a better person. It's about preparing you and us to fully belong in that restored creation. So here's the takeaway. Every act of endurance now is a signpost of the coming kingdom and a stone in the construction of God's living temple. It's both your transformation and your participation in God's mission to renew all things. Your endurance is part of an eternal story, a story that began in a garden, a story that ends in a city where nothing is broken and nothing is missing. So James says, let endurance have its full effect. If you haven't watched James 1:4 breakdown yet, go check it out. It's the foundation for this teaching, and keep an eye out for follow-up meditations coming out soon. This will help us take this verse even deeper. Let's keep letting endurance have its full effect.